So hello everyone, welcome back to another video of ICP5 coding. So in this video, we are going to talk about loops. Loop is one of the most important element of any program. Most of our programs, most of our games, most of our algorithms generally work on loops. I mean that is one of the most fundamental but the most important component of any program. So we're going to talk about loops in this video. I'm going to divide the loops into two parts. So in the first part, that is this video, we're going to learn about the basics, the basic syntax of loops and how to apply them. And in the next video, we're going to look at a large number of examples, not large, I mean 5 to 6 examples, which can clear our concept about loops and tell us which kind of loops to apply where. So let's begin the video. Okay, to begin, loops are statements which are used to execute a specific section of code repeated number of times. This number of times can be controlled by the programmer, and if I give an example about loops, which we've already done, is the function draw. That is a kind of loop as it executes a specific bunch of code repeated number of times, infinite number of times. But the loops we are going to make in this video, those loops are going to run only for a specific period of time. So let's try to understand what is the difference between the function draw and the user defined loops. Okay, so these are the basic two differences. So the draw function executes every line of code in finite number of times, but our user-defined loops are going to execute only for a fixed number of p time, which can be controlled by us. The second point of difference is that when you are running the function draw, each iteration, that means each execution of the code, can be seen one by one, as I've written like that. So if you change the, let's say, the position of an object, so each position of the object you can see one by one, not that once it moves out of the screen only then you can see. You can see each position, each iteration of the change in the position of the object. On the other hand, the user-defined loops, which we are going to make, they are going to display all the iterations together after the loop gets terminated. That means after the loop gets finished. That means after this fixed number of times are over, only then we will be able to see all the iterations all together. So this is the basic difference between the user-defined loops and the draw function. Now, I want you to think for a second. So why is this? So all iterations are displayed all together after loop termination. This point is very important and this is the explanation of this point. So if I ask you, why does the user defined loop execute only a fixed number of time which is not infinite? So the answer is given in this. I would like you to think about this answer. I'm going to provide the solution while I will be going on with the draw loops. Let us now try to see what are the basic steps which are involved in creating a user-defined loop. So the first step to create a user-defined loop will be to have a control variable. This control variable will determine where the loop is starting, when the loop will end, and how much time the loop is going to run. So the control variable is going to determine all these three things. So we need to define the control variable at the beginning. Then comes determine where to start. That means what should be the initial value of the control variable. So this control variable, let's say I call it for the sake I. So whoops, what is that? So what has happened? Okay, so where I was, yeah. So let's have the control variable be, let's say I. So this is my variable. So I will then initialize this variable to a specific value. So that is going to be the start point of my variable. Next step will be to find where to end. That means when do I want to end my loop? That is a kind of condition that has to be done on the control variable. That is, I have declared this as I. So this is I have to define the end condition. This is the second section of loops. And the third part will be the operation to determine that what should be the increment or decrement, the change in the control variable. And this operation is kind of determines at how much time the loop is going to run. So these four steps are the key to write a loop. So let's try to write one loop in our p5.js web editor with the help of these things which we have learned so far. So before I start, there are two kinds of loops, at least in JavaScript. So they are for loop and the while loop. So let's start by understanding the while loop. Okay, so I'm here in my p5.js web editor. So for now, we are just going to do text-based programming. So we do not need any canvas. So I can use a new p5 function called no canvas. So it does not draw any canvas on the screen. And then I do not need this background and all. I do not need function draw. So let's see our while loop. Okay, the syntax of while loop is start with writing while. Okay, let me close this. Yeah, start with writing while. This is the keyword. While variable satisfies the condition, and that condition is going to be determined by us. While the variable satisfies the condition, open the braces like this, then write your code. This is the next part. Write your code. Which code do you want in your loop? And then, of course, you need to do the operation on the variable. You need to do the operation on the variable. This is the syntax of a simple while loop. So let's try to have a program using while loop which prints a specific line of code 5 times. So let me have a variable called I, and actually I is the tradition to write a loop with I, J and K like these. So you can use any variable. This is just to show you that these are mostly used. So let I starts at 0. So I'm going to begin my while loop here. So while, and this variable is going to be I, and my condition is going to be, let's say I is less than 5. I'm going to explain why am I doing this, but let this be my condition. So while I is less than 5, print, or just console.log learning loops. So I'm just going to print this in the console. Okay, so just console.log this. And now, first let me save the sketch because something stupid is going to happen. Okay, so if I were to run this code, my website is going to crash. I'm going to explain the reason why. So let's just run this. Okay, I can see nothing, and now you can see my window has actually freeze. My mouse has yeah, you can see I cannot select this text either. So my mouse has lost its selection power. Why did this happen? So the reason is in our differences. So I had explained that a while loop or any kind of user defined loop executes our command all our iterations after the loop gets terminated. But this loop is never going to get terminated because I is at 0. So I is always going to remain at less than 5, whatever may be the condition. So this loop is going to run infinite number of times. Yes. But we are not going to see the output because if a loop runs infinite number of times and it does not show the iterations before it stops running, then we will not be able to see anything, and ultimately the website is going to crash as such. So we need to have to reach to the end condition. So I'm going to refresh this page. Okay, and I will have to close this. I'm going to reopen another sketch. So let's quickly do that. Okay, we're back. So now if I say I plus plus, that means increase I with each iteration, then ultimately you will find the loop will get terminated. If I do this, you will find that, well, the p5 console is like that, so it shows the number of times it is the learning loop statement has been printed twice. I mean, you cannot see it printing twice, but this 5 shows how many times we are printing the same set of code. So let's see. So I was at 0. So while I started this, so I wrote console.log. I increased I by 1. So I became 1. This continues for 5 times, and when I becomes 5, the loop condition is false, the loop stops running. So this is my operation on the variable, this is my variable, and this is my end condition. Now let's apply the same thing for another loop which is called the for loop. And this is a more compact and more shorthand way of writing a loop. For this, I do not need a variable here. I can just write the syntax. So the syntax for writing a for loop is, if I can show it there, yes. The syntax for writing a for loop is for, start with the keyword. For let I equal 0. So you write this variable, define this variable right inside the for loop. Then we will have to have a semicolon. Then write the condition. Then write the operation, that means the change in the I. Then write the operation, then open and close the curly brackets, and then write the code you want. Then write the code that you want. This is the syntax for a for loop. So let's print this learning loops 5 times using the for loop. So open this, and the condition is going to be the same. I is less than 5 and I plus plus. And then my code is going to be the same thing, that is just console.log learning, just learning. I do not have much time to write so much, just write loops, that's it. Okay, now this code executes the same thing, it prints loop 5 times. So this code and the while code which we just discussed in the previous phase are actually the same, but I would kind of recommend you to use the for loops in most situations. Now a common question of many is which loop is more advantageous. So if you talk about a code where both of these are working, then I will say that for loop is a better option. But there are some codes where the for loop is not going to actually work, and in those cases you will need to use the while loop. So it depends on the situation actually. Okay, let's now do one more example before I end this video. So let's try to print all the numbers from 1 to 5. This could be interesting. From 1 to 5, let's try to do this. So definitely I'm going to do that using loops. So I will need I'm going to do it with for loop. So this part of the code is going to be the same. Let I is equals 1. So I'm going to start I at 1. I'm going to tell you why. And till I is less than 6 and I plus plus, each time increase the I by 1. Then console.log this value of the I variable. And if I run this, you will find 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So why did this happen? So when I'm starting I at 1, I am console.logging I, which is 1, so I get 1. Here the operation has been shown that I will increase by 1 each iteration. So in the next iteration, I is equals 2, so I get 2. Similarly, I get 3, 4, and 5. Now, when I is equal 6, the condition becomes false, so the loop does not run. So we can do the same thing using a while loop. So for that, I will have to define the variable in the beginning as a separate one. Then I will have to say for while, I have to say while I is less than 6, and this should be 1. I have while I is less than 6, console.log I, and increase I by 1. So this loop is going to provide me the same outcome as you can see right here. So you can find different sequences, number sequences, different other kind of algorithms using loops. You can already try to see what more possibilities come to us when we write the loops. We could do one more thing. We could then do this same similar thing for printing them in the opposite way. So just change the code like this. We are going to get 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So these are all sorts of possibilities with loops. You could also try to increase all the variables with 2. So if I write this, I am going to see 6, 4, 2. So these kinds of number sequences are definitely possible. You could try to print the prime number sequence and many more kind of number sequences using for loops. We are going to cover a few more examples where loops come into proper use in the next video. Till then, thanks for watching and goodbye.